Welcome to Coffee, Culture, and the Capital with Sophia and Greg. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back. We are so excited to be back with you all. It has been a busy week at the state capitol here in California. So we have 4 bills that we're going to go through today with you guys. You guys are going to see clips from the testimony. We're going to talk through what these bills are, where they are heading to next. And we are going to be talking about everything from the potential erasure of charter and homeschools to we're going to hear detransition share their stories at the state capitol. So, Greg, we had a hearing on SB 497 this week. This was a Scott Wiener bill. Anyone listening, I'm sure, is very familiar with Senator Scott Wiener and the bills he pushes at the state capitol. They tend to be anti-parents' rights, anti the protection of children. And so, Greg, we saw this bill get heard in the Assembly Public Safety Committee. And tell us a little bit about what we're seeing happen in SB 497.
Yeah, this particular bill is really about protecting the rights of those who medically transition kids with sterilizing drugs and mutilating surgeries. This is all about the transgender craze and the whole idea that minors can actually be trapped in the wrong body. And when when a minor thinks they're an opposite sex or they're some other gender, they can take drugs and surgeries to modify their bodies. And we have states around the country that are now banning this for minors because it does not help them. It actually harms them. And there was a recent study out by the Health and Human Services, and it listed off all the damaging effects that what they call gender-affirming care, which is a terrible euphemism for what this is, but that's what they call it. But here's what the recent report says about the damaging effects. It says there are no conclusive evidence that hormones reduce youth suicide. So, but that's what they're claiming. Like they keep saying, if young people don't get these drugs, they're going to kill themselves. The evidence does not show that. Also says that depression and anxiety persist even after medical transition. And medical transition, what are we talking about? We're talking about young girls getting their breasts removed as young as 13, 15 years old, right? And they're discovering long-term this does nothing for their mental health. Hearing in also these processes, the assessment process in the U.S. is shockingly inadequate, often reduced to 2 hours. That means people can go in first appointment. They have an evaluation for 2 hours, and that's all it takes before they can get their drugs and signed off on some of these surgeries. So evidence is coming out, but California is doubling down. This particular bill makes whoever's distributing the drugs and doing the surgeries, it provides secrecy. It really does protect the whole industry, at least trying to, here in California, even though the federal government is now coming down hard on the hospitals that are transitioning kids. The LA Children's Hospital has shut down their gender clinic. Stanford has stopped doing medical treatments. Hospitals around the country are being investigated by the Department of Justice for doing these surgeries on minors. So a lot of these hospitals are pulling back, realizing they're going to get sued into the ground. But Senator Wiener is charging forward, saying it's, fascist federal government that is seeking to take away health care from these poor kids who are simply trying to live their authentic lives. But there was a great witness before the this committee you're about to hear. She herself had her breasts removed when she was, 13.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to tell, and she's going to tell that story, and it's going to be a striking rebuke to what these legislators are trying to promote. Of course, they still passed the bill, but they were horrific. They were confronted with the reality, so it was a great testimony. So why don't we listen?
My name is Layla Jane. I'm a detransitioner. Last time I testified in opposition to this bill, Senator Wiener claimed that what happened to me is rare, that there is a moral panic, that only a microscopic number of children are undergoing gender interventions, and that anyone who is saying otherwise is a liar. Look at my chest. I matter. At the age of 12, I was approved for a double mastectomy, and I went under the knife a couple weeks after I turned 13. Listen to my voice. Testosterone did this. My vocal cords are so large, I can't scream. I have difficulty speaking sometimes. Don't you dare trivialize what happened to me and lie to Californians that this isn't happening. I am one of thousands, and this bill is designed to hide the ever-growing number of kids being poisoned, sterilized, and maimed. Young females ages 12 to 17 having their breasts removed increased 13-fold between 2013 and 2020 and continues to increase. The number of children ages 6 to 17 placed on puberty blockers and hormones over a 5-year period more than doubled to 1,400 and 4,200, respectively. And those stats don't include my provider, Kaiser, the biggest chop shop on the West Coast. These are not microscopic numbers. Don't blame my parents, who were coerced into consenting because puberty blockers, testosterone, and surgeries were the only treatment offered to address my cutting, suicidal ideation, and inability to function. Not one provider explored my autistic traits. Not one stepped in to consider if my childhood sexual abuse was the reason I wanted to shed my female body. Not one said, your daughter is perfect the way she is. Now that would be considered hateful. This bill is designed to protect medical providers who harmed me and are harming other children who run away to this state under SB 107 or who violate safeguarding laws in their own states. All of you should be panicked and ashamed as you sit in silence or look at me with venom. Vote no.
So we had that powerful testimony, and as Greg said, unfortunately, it did still pass through the committee. We've seen this bill pass through on party lines. The Democrats are voting no, and it's the Democrats are voting yes, and it's the Republicans that are either abstaining from voting or voting no. But we also had a testimony from a mother who her daughter got sucked up in this trans ideology, and the mom said no and pushed back. And now, after a couple of years, the daughter has come to terms that she is a girl, she is a woman, and that was not a mistake. And so I wanted to also check out Beth Bourne's testimony from this hearing.
Beth Bourne of Our Duty. My daughter believed that she was a transgender boy. She was so adamant that she convinced a court to change her name and sex marker on her birth certificate against my challenge. She was 15. She also begged for hormones and to have her breasts removed, and I refused consent. She is now 19, never medicalized, and has embraced her female body. She was never transgender. No one is. No one. Gender identity is a canard or a false belief. This is why you must vote no on SB 497. How brazen and foolish of the senator to admit in his bill that it is his intent to violate President Trump's executive orders. Haven't you been paying attention? Parents like me are filling the FTC's and DOJ's tip lines with evidence of how this state is sacrificing children and vulnerable adults to the transgender agenda. Do you really think your former colleague, Bill Asaley, and his boss, Harmeet Dillon, who is also my former attorney, are unaware of your intentional violations of executive orders and federal law? And that they will not strike back with the force of the supreme law of this nation, which, in case you have forgotten, is the U.S. Constitution? The full faith and credit clause requires that each state honor the public acts and judicial proceedings of other states. This is a constitutional mandate that has held our union together for over 2 centuries. SB 497 directly violates this principle by interfering with the legitimate authority of out-of-state courts and other governmental actors to access records of medical treatments, as well as track testosterone. a Schedule III drug that carries with it the risk of liver cancer, increased heart attacks, incontinence, infertility, and a whole host of other lifelong ailments. For what purpose are you protecting the drug prescribers who are harming female bodies? Vote no on SB 497.
So another powerful testimony, and Greg, again, we then saw the legislators unfortunately pass Senator Scott Wiener's SB 497 right through the Assembly Public Safety Committee straight to the Assembly Appropriations Committee.
Right. They're doubling down. They are not giving up. They're fully invested. They refuse to be rebuked. At least repent, turn from what they're doing, recognize what they've done is wrong. So, folks, the only thing that's going to, change this is you have to. People have to start losing elections. They have to start losing lawsuits. They have to start losing funding. And the public, the people who are the ultimate authority in this country, need to respond. And if you don't, then we're gonna keep doing this and mutilating kids, folks. It's up to the public. So, public, you can. This is your government. These are your representatives. You can say, well, I don't want to deal with politics. Politics is nasty. Well, politics is tearing off, cutting, mutilating children, right? Ignorance to politics, ignoring politics just harms people. So, you are called as a Christian. If you're a Christian, when you see evil, you don't stand there and just turn your head and walk away. You do something. And so, folks, I appeal to you. Call your legislators. Encourage them to speak up and say something. These brave women are standing up to these powers that be who are, aren't changing. And so, the only thing that's going to stop them is other good folks standing up and calling this out. So, anyway.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes, and that's not the only bill that we saw this week that had to do with all this transgender ideology. We also saw AB 1084 by Assemblymember Zabur. And Greg, you actually testified on AB 1084, calling out this bill about it being an attack on parents' rights, and that parents that disagree with what the state's pushing are basically losing their rights. And so, again, we unfortunately did see this bill pass through the Senate Health straight to appropriations. But Greg, in this bill, AB 1084, what is Assemblymember Zabur trying to accomplish?
Well, he's trying to make it easier and quicker for you to change your birth certificate and marriage license so that it reflects the sex that you want be on your document. So if your birth certificate says you're a male, but you think you're a female, he wants it to be expedited. So within 6 weeks, he started out 2 weeks, he wants it immediately changed and doesn't want to have to make people go to a hearing to change their sex on their sex in their name. And so, that's already legal. Like, you can go and have that done. He's just trying to expedite the process. But what he's also doing is shortening the process to do that. But he's also making it easier for children to do this without their parents' approval. And so in one of the most disturbing things it says, parents are supposed to sign off when a kid wants to change their sex. But this bill says you can't object if your objection is based on your belief that sex is binary. So a parent who says, no, I don't want my child to change their birth certificate. I don't believe that they are the gender they feel, like biology determines their gender. Well, that's not a good objection. And so the court is not to listen to you. And so that's a direct violation of parental rights. It's going to be struck down. A couple weeks ago, the Supreme Court again affirmed the rights of parents to raise their child in their own religious beliefs. It was Mahmoud versus Taylor. This is a case out of Maryland that we had talked about before, where all this gender LGBT curriculum was being pushed into schools, and parents were not being allowed to opt out. And more or less, the Supreme Court came back and says, you know what, you are not allowed, just because a kid goes to public school doesn't mean you can undermine their religious beliefs. And especially in elementary school, give them curriculum that tells them what they're taught at home is wrong. And it just reemphasized that parents are the ones who are ultimately can determine how a child is raised, what beliefs they have, what beliefs they're taught. And the state doesn't have the right to undermine that. So that's exactly what this particular bill is doing. If a parent can decide to opt out of certain curriculum that is offensive to their faith, they certainly can object to their kids changing their sex on their birth certificate. So this is going to be struck down, but California is pushing forward anyway. I testified against this, and sadly, they just ignored me. Even the Republican up there, didn't vote for it, but she put her head down and said nothing. So anyway, you can hear the testimony and judge for yourself.
Chair members, my name is Greg Burt with the California Family Council, and I'm rising in strong opposition to AB 1084. First, a person cannot change their sex. Sex is not assigned. It's observed and recorded based on immutable biological reality. Our state documents should reflect this reality. But that being said, this bill goes farther by launching a direct assault on parental rights. The state of California is not a parent. Just last month, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld again the constitutional right of parents to direct the upbringing of their children in Mahmoud versus Taylor. Justices in a 6-3 decision declared again that the state is not to interfere with this fundamental liberty. Parents have a right to raise their children as they see fit. Now, while AB 1084 claims to honor this right, requiring approval from all living parents, it then guts it. The bill says a parent's objection must be based on a good cause, and specifically prohibits objections based on the fact that the proposed change does not align with the child's biological sex. In other words, if a parent believes, as millions of us do, that sex is binary and unchangeable, the view is not just rejected, it's disqualified. Oh, thank you. Let me be direct. Let me ask you directly. Are parents' rights only valid if parents agree with the state's ideology on gender? If a parent dissents, do they forfeit the right to raise their own child? This bill is blatantly unconstitutional, it's discriminatory, and it expresses religious bigotry. AB 84 is not just bad policy, it's illegal, it's immoral, and it's destined to be struck down by the court. Senators, I urge you to vote no on AB 1084. Thank you.
Well, phenomenal job, Greg. I think it's powerful for them to hear the truth. And whether they choose to still vote yes on these things, as the Democrats did, and like you said, as the Republicans just simply abstained from voting, at the end of the day, we can say that we did our job as community members, as civilians, as Californians, by letting them know the truth and letting them know what these bills are actually going to do. I wish I could say that was it for bad bills that were heard this week. Unfortunately, there are always a handful of bills that we are opposing at the state capitol being heard each week. And so another one we heard was AB 84. And I think we saw a significant amount of Californians show up to this hearing on Wednesday. We saw teachers, we saw families, parents, students show up at the state capitol to make their voices heard. And AB 84 is by Assemblymember Maratsuchi. This was being heard in the Senate Education Committee. It ended up being a full 3-hour hearing. So don't worry, we're not going to sit and make you guys all watch the 3 hours right now. But if you want to go check out that hearing, you can go ahead to California Family Council's YouTube page to see all the bills we're talking about today. You can see their full hearings, the testimony clips, everything like that. But AB 84, Greg, as I said, there was families and students and educators showing up for this bill. What is AB 84 doing, and why did these family members feel the need to show up?
Yeah, it's a bill supposedly to go after charter schools who have gone bad. There have been some fairly public reports and prosecutions of corruption, especially down in San Diego. There were some folks that pretended to start a charter school with fake students, and they ended up stealing a lot of money. They got prosecuted and brought to justice. And so there's an understanding, hey, we need to reform charter schools so that, that kind of accountability, that thing can't happen anymore. But as what happens many times when something regarding charter schools happen, the regulations they propose come out to crush charter schools. Especially this bill is especially going after homeschool charters, where and my own kids all went through homeschool charters here in California, all the way through their education. And that means these are we're actually doing homeschooling, but we meet with a teacher, a certified teacher, every 20 days. And we get to pick out our curriculum, but any curriculum or extracurricular activities that aren't that aren't religious can be paid for by state funds. And they give you vouchers to spend, not vouchers, they give you some money that you can spend on these vendors that they have, where you can do piano lessons, and you can do sports activities and extracurricular activities, many of the things that public schools get to do. And you get some money to spend on those type of things. And you can buy some math curriculum and stuff to help your kids with their education. And so we've done this for years, but that kind of freedom to many of the public schools, the teachers unions particularly, do not like how much freedom. They don't want homeschooled type groups to get any type of federal funding, any type of state funding. And so what this bill is about is overloading that whole system with all kind of regulations that would make those homeschool charters almost impossible to run. One of the things that was really talked about a lot in the debate is about the third party vendors, and like with our particular school, we spent vendor money on music lessons. And who do we go to music lessons? Well, it was somebody who was doing teaching music out of their home, like many folks who teach music. This particular lady, played piano for her congregation, and then at home she had a business she ran, and so we were one of her vendors. Now, she was not a certified teacher, right? She was not an employee of the state, but she was teaching music, and so the charter school paid her for the music lessons my kids took. My kids also went to martial arts. My son, it was a really professional place called Kovars here in the Sacramento area. He did that for 10 years, right? And they paid the monthly fee. Now, they aren't certified teachers either, but this new regulations would require that all vendors, and I'm reading from the analysis, all the vendors would have to be credentialed employees of the charter school. So that would eliminate all the vendors, because the charter school doesn't have a music teacher. The charter school doesn't have a martial arts teacher. So all that flexibility, all the extracurricular money we get to spend on those things to enhance our kids' education would be eliminated, and it would eliminate the reason to have a homeschool charters in the first place. Because that's why parents do it, because it helps them pay for those extracurricular activities that a lot of kids in public school get. So, and there's the bill also requires some really stringent oversight, that current public schools have to do. All the flexibility that charter schools have is slowly being eroded so that they're just like the public schools. Well, but the whole point of charter schools is to give them some more independence so they can operate in a more independent way. And that's what the public schools don't want. The public brick and mortar schools don't want. And so there's still lots of negotiating going on. We hope the bill still has an opportunity to die, but hundreds of people showed up to object to the bill. The Me Too testimony, as you will see, went on for hours. The bill just barely passed by one vote. So then now it's out of the Senate Education Committee. So we'll see what happens if it gets through appropriations and it gets to the floor of the Senate. We're hoping it doesn't make it. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. And we have a great testimony from Superintendent Mary Cox, who came and testified in opposition to AB 84. So let's check out what she had to say.
Good morning. I'm Mary Cox, Superintendent of Core Butte Charter, a TK-12 flex-based charter in Butte County, funded as a non-classroom-based charter. Over half of our students are socioeconomically disadvantaged, and more than 17% receive special education. We're a safe haven for all students, including LGBTQ plus youth, students facing mental health challenges, bullying, and those in credit recovery. We were devastated by the 2018 Camp Fire. More than half of our students became homeless overnight. Butte County has the highest percentage of students in the state with 4 or more adverse childhood experiences. We've invested in clinician-led wellness programs, not because we were required to, but because our students need it. If AB 84 passes, we'll be forced to absorb major new administrative costs, putting these essential services at risk for our students. AB 84 imposes costly unfunded mandates, including 10 new audit reports every year and potential authorizer changes. I experienced that under 1507. It was disruptive, expensive, and pulled focus away from students. Unlike districts, charter schools are not eligible to apply for additional mandated cost reimbursement. Where is the funding to pay for this? It's simply unfair. Section 43 of the bill would prohibit us from using funds for enrichment provided by community partners, even when aligned with academic goals and overseen by credentialed teachers. This provision will cut off access to important student enrichment, like high-impact tutoring for students with dyslexia or learning about local ecology from Indigenous community members. In contrast, school districts can use extended learning opportunity funds for similar programs with non-credentialed partners. We aren't offering things school districts don't provide elsewhere, yet under AB 84, we'd have different rules, and our students would have less access to educational opportunity. That's inequitable and harmful to our students. Finally, AB 84 would classify my school as a virtual school because less than 20% of instruction happens in person. That label doesn't fit. I have $11 million invested in facilities that are used daily. Some students are on campus 4 days a week. Others only come to meet with their teacher or for special education services. Our school is flexible by design to meet the unique needs of our students and parents. We support strong oversight, but AB 84 places unfair, unfunded burdens on schools like mine that are doing the right thing. AB 84 puts our programs for vulnerable youth at risk. We respectfully oppose AB 84 and encourage continued collaboration on thoughtful, balanced solutions. Thank you.
So we had some powerful testimonies that laid out very clearly the effects AB 84 are going to have. And like Greg said, this is now going to be off to the Senate Appropriations Committee. And then if it hits the Senate floor, we'll continue to push back. You guys can always visit californiafamily.org. Check out our Action Center. For some bills, we will have information and talking points for you to directly call your legislators. But it's another way where you can search who your state senator and your assembly members are. You can get their phone numbers and give them calls and urge them to vote a certain way, because that does make a difference, making those phone calls. And I promise they are super easy to make. So spend 5 minutes once a week making a couple of phone calls and urging your legislators to vote a certain way. And if AB 84 hits the Senate floor, we'll have to be doing that. And the last bill we're going to talk about today, Greg, is AB 727. The Trevor Project bill. And there has been a lot of national news about what the Trevor Project is. We're seeing the Trump administration do some things in regards to the Trevor Project. We've talked about AB 727 on the podcast before. And the Trevor Project, if you guys have not heard us talk about it or seen our social media posts or articles about it, you guys can go check out our blogs at californiafamily.org, any of our social media posts across X, Facebook, Instagram, but also the main thing we've been pushing about Trevor Project is it's basically a predator's paradise. It allows grown adults to join this private chat rooms with children. These adults can just easily lie and say they're 12, 13, 14 years old. And it has some pretty disturbing chat rooms. And Greg, you yourself checked it out just to see how easy can adults access this and get in contact with minors. And it's beyond disturbing what's going on here. But before we dive in more about what the Trevor Project is, Greg, what is AB 727 pushing?
Well, it is requiring the Trevor Project suicide hotline and text line will have to be placed on the back of all student IDs, 7th through 12th grade, and all public universities. And so this is a private organization. It's not regulated by the government. It's not really overseen. We're just going to advertise all of these students should go to the Trevor Project as a safe place to get counseling, to get help, to find friends. They have all these resources, including something called the Trevor Space. And the Trevor Space is a international community intended to help you figure out what sexual orientation you are and what gender identity you have. And so you can easily sign up. They don't do any age verification. They simply ask your date of birth, and you have instant access to this community with out of 180 nations, and it's advertised as a place for 13-year-olds to 24-year-olds, right? And so just put all the LGBT stuff aside for a moment. Obviously we disagree with their philosophy of life and overview, but why in the world would you send a vulnerable 13, 14-year-old kid who is suicidal, despairing of life, wants to find other people to be their friend, and you send them off to a website where there's young adults, unvetted young adults who are saying, "Hey, I'll be your friend. I'll be your buddy. I'll be your replacement family." And that's exactly what the website, the Trevor Space, is. It has all these various clubs you can join to explore your sexual orientation, whether you're into, polyamory or, gender fluidity, or you're into, they have clubs on, anarchism and Satanism. If you're a Christian and you're queer, or you're a Muslim and you're queer, they have some clubs if you hate your mom and dad, and we could commiserate about how miserable they are and they're too strict. And then they have a club called Chosen Family, where you can go and find other brothers and parents who will act like brothers and parents. And of course, they'll affirm any gender identity you come up with, right? Then you can talk to them in private chat rooms. And so what we did for a testimony this time is we brought in a school board member down in Santa Ana who actually got the Trevor Project hotline taken out of her elementary schools because of the danger of putting young people in touch with adults like this. And then we had somebody a former cop, who now runs a anti-trafficking organization that rescues minors out of sex trafficking situations around the world. And he's very familiar with how predators work. They're always looking for young, vulnerable minors, and they know how to manipulate them and form relationships with them. And he went on the Trevor space, pretended to be a minor, and he almost immediately had somebody eager to take the conversation off to another website known for trafficking in pornography, child pornography. And so he says this is the worst thing you could do is to encourage kids to go to this website that seems to have no fear that predators are lurking around looking for vulnerable kids. And just because we are so concerned about how high the suicide rates, attempted suicide, thoughts of suicide are among those who identify as LGBT, they're just putting blinders on and sending them off to this organization that is funded. It pulls in over $100 million a year. It's funded by the biggest corporations, has tons of federal funding, which I know the Trump administration is now pulling, but no one is looking seriously at this. And now we're going to have this organization pushed on every student, public school student in the state. Folks, this has all the warning signs of being really bad. But at this point, we don't have a whole lot of media reporting on any of it. And so I want to let you to hear the testimony from these other folks that I mentioned, and check it out yourself, trevorspace.org, and make your own mind up.
Absolutely. Let's check out Brenda Lebsack's testimony first.
Hi. Suicidal youth need help, but not from Trevor Project, which masquerades as a suicide hotline. I'm Brenda Lebsack, a retired teacher, former state delegate of the California Teachers Association, school board member of Santa Ana Unified, and founder of the Interfaith Statewide Coalition. Today I speak on behalf of the Interfaith Coalition representing Orthodox Muslims, Catholics, Protestants, and Jews. We've been sounding the alarm on a grassroots level that Trevor Space, accessed through Trevor Project, is dangerous for kids. This is how I discovered the dangers. I worked in 7 elementary schools and noticed posters in student restrooms with Trevor Project as an LGBT suicide prevention resource. I was concerned about oversight, so I texted the number pretending to be a child. I said, "I'm unsure about my gender and scared about puberty. What should I do?" Once the phone counselor established I was not suicidal, I was referred to Trevor Space to explore my genders and sexualities in an affirming international community. I followed their directives, put in a date of birth of a 13-year-old, and had immediate access to all kinds of chat clubs, such as Guilt and Secrets, Furries, Non-Binary Pals, Witchcraft, a gay men's club with the tagline, "Let's Talk About Boys!" Chosen Family Club. I saw chats that said, "I'm lonely and need a friend," with responses of, I'll be your friend." As a teacher, I took this disturbing evidence to a law firm to present it to the superintendent as a liability issue. As a result, Santa Ana Unified removed all Trevor Project posters out of the elementary school restrooms. Trevor Space places all students, especially those who identify as LGBTQ, at a higher risk of human trafficking and sexual exploitation. Please go to trevorspace.org before you vote today. The Interfaith Coalition urges you to vote no on AB 727 so we can make schools a safe place. Thank you.
My name is Kevin Brown. I'm the founder of Lives Worth Saving and a former law enforcement officer with 30 years of experience combating crime and as a SWAT team member. Since retiring, I have spent over a decade identifying and recovering those being sexually exploited locally, nationally, and internationally, including children exploited on the dark web. I strongly oppose AB 727, which mandates printing the Trevor Project hotline on student ID cards. While I support suicide prevention, I am deeply concerned about the risk of Trevor Space, the online community linked to the hotline. Trevor Space is unmonitored, does not verify user age, and explicitly states it is not for crisis intervention or suicide prevention. This creates an unsafe environment where adults can interact with minors. Creating an account posing as a 14-year-old male, I quickly accessed unmonitored chat rooms. I observed conversations moving to platforms like Discord, a communication platform I have personally used in the past when dealing with persons who sell and distribute child sexual abuse materials. Based on my experience of debriefing over 100 sexual abuse survivors, I know how sexual predators use such spaces to groom vulnerable youth. They use patience, manipulation, and are skilled at building trust with victims, especially in unmonitored online spaces. Trevor's Space unfortunately provides that exact environment. The existing 988 National Suicide Hotline is sufficient. Adding a second hotline that can funnel students into a risky online environment is not only unnecessary, but dangerous. I urge you to vote no on AB 727 and protect our youth. If you have any questions about how a predator uses the grooming process, please ask. Thank you.
So those were powerful testimonies from two completely different kind of career path people, which I think is powerful. It wasn't just two school board members or two police officers or anything like that. You saw a mix. And so that bill, even after the legislators heard, the state senators heard those two testimonies, they still passed it through the Senate Education Committee on a 5-2 vote. It was a party line vote. So the 5 Democrats on the Senate Education Committee voted yes to continue to push that through, and the 2 Democrats on the committee did vote no. So we're now going to see that go to the Senate Appropriations Committee, and again, that is another bill. We will need you all to call your state senators and urge them to vote no if this bill hits the Senate floor. You can easily do that at californiafamily.org. When you go to our website, you just have to click on Action Center. On Action Center, if you click on AB 727, we provide a script, we provide talking points and information, and we will directly connect you to your legislator's office. So all you have to do is type in your information and click call, and we'll be able to help you do that to urge a no vote on AB 727. Again, your voices do matter. They do make a difference. If we didn't think they did, we wouldn't be urging you to do so. We've watched it make a difference at the state capitol when lots of phone calls start flooding in. So make sure to do that. And Greg, unless you have any final words. Oh, all right.
I don't. I think that's it. I think we gave people lots to think about and lots to do and lots to pray about. Yeah, it was packed with all kinds of stuff to think about.
Yes, absolutely. Well, with that, we will see you guys all next time. If you liked the episode, make sure to share with friends on podcast platforms. Give it a 5-star review if you thought it was 5-star worthy. But tune in next time for more information on the Capitol. But for now, you can stay up to date across all social media platforms and at californiafamily.org. Sign up for our weekly newsletter so you can hear what's happening at the Capitol and up and down the state of California every Monday in your email newsletter inbox. But with that, we will see you guys next time.